So yes, welcome through to our demonstrations, which are really both a demonstration and an instruction guide for you to be able to follow through on your own systems. We're going to be configuring the SSH server, and we'll be configuring this on our Ubuntu 2 system. So we want both Ubuntu 1 and Ubuntu 2 up and running. But for this demonstration, we'll be working on Ubuntu 2. We'll be taking a look at the runtime configuration, correcting any changes that we need within the sshd_config file, and then restart and reread our configuration to make sure everything is the way that we need it. So come on, let's find that command line. And look at this, our glorious command line. But look, we're also working on Ubuntu 2. We've got both Ubuntu 2 and Ubuntu 1 up and running, but we're configuring the SSH server on Ubuntu 2. We're going to use Ubuntu 1 as our client to connect into this SSH server. But we also are going to need a user account on this SSH server that we can use when we log in. So we're going to be creating in the first instance a brand new user. So we can run then our sudo and user add. We'll make sure the home directory is created. And because we're going to be logging in as an interactive user, we want a reasonable shell. So we're setting our default shell to be /bin/bash. We can call the user tux and then hit the big enter key. So there you go, we've created our user. But of course, we're also going to need a password initially anyway, until we've set up key-based authentication. So we can use sudo passwd and tux, and then of course set any password that you can remember for the user account. Once we've got this then configured, our user is ready, and we're now looking at configuring our SSH server. We want to make sure we've got a couple of options available to us. We want to make sure that password-based authentication is allowed, but we also want to ensure that the root user cannot log in at all via SSH. So we need to check our current configuration, and we can check the current configuration using the sshd command itself. So I need to elevate my privileges to be able to run SSHD. And if we use the option uppercase T, we will validate the configuration file and print the configuration settings. But yes, we've got a lot of configuration settings, so it's not so easy, is it? However, we can make it much easier by searching the output with grep. The output is all lowercase, so it's easily searched. We can use grep. I'm going to use uppercase E so we can use an enhanced regular expression. And that enhanced regular expression allows me to group expressions together. So I can specify then my group with parentheses, and then specify that we're looking for password, the string password, for password authentication, or permit, the string permit, for permit root login. With this done, we can then go through and close our grouping by putting in our right parentheses, and then close off our quotes with the closing single quote. As we can see now, we've got permit root login. Well, that's sent to without password. So that means we can use key-based authentication as root. But ideally, we should never log on as a root user via SSH. It's a known account, so we should disable root login. So we want that set to no. Password-based authentication then follows, and that's set to yes. But that's a change I make in the setup of my own virtual machine. By default in this image, it would be turned off. We want to make sure password authentication at the moment is turned on, so we can log in as our Tux account. Once we've logged in as a Tux account, we can then enable key-based authentication for Tux. But it helps to have password authentication so we can copy our public key up. And we'll see how to do that. I want to make sure these changes then are made. So I'm going to write through to the etc SSH directory and then the SSHD for daemon _configuration file. So we'll open up the configuration file. I can move this to the top of the screen so we can easily see the file name and path. Hitting the big enter key, of course, we open it up. I can use / to search. And here we can see then password authentication. It's uncommented and currently it's set to yes. That is the setting that we want at the moment. In yours, it might be there, but it might be set to no. Just make sure password authentication is set to yes. When we look for permit root, we can see that we can find it here as a commented value, but it might also exist as an uncommented value. So let's go through and double check. We can hit enter to run our search. And then we can hit N for next. We do find it again, but this is just explaining the settings. N again just comes back. You can see we're just toggling between these two settings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy my existing line. We don't have to copy it, but it makes a good idea, I think, so we can see what the default value was. So I'm just going to use a YY and a P. We can then go through and use X to delete the comment. My cursor was underneath the comment. Uppercase A appends at the end of the line, and I can then remove prohibit password and change the value to no. Once it's looking good, let's do our escape and X to save and exit. I remember what we said about the SSHD-T. It was validating the file and printing the values. So we know we haven't made any syntax errors in our file. It is readable and we can print out the values. But of course, though, these values are not in place until we restart our server. But we've got the SSH uppercase T and the SSHD lowercase t. It's the lowercase t that only does the syntax check and doesn't print any results. So if I use a lowercase t, we're validating the configuration file, but we're not printing any of the configuration values. Whereas, of course, with the uppercase T, we will print the configuration values as well as the validation. But we want to make sure now that these valid settings are put into place so we can go through and restart our service. So sudo and systemctl restart and SSHD. We're now up and running with the configuration values that we have made on our Ubuntu 2 system. We're going to take a look now at how we can configure our SSH client, and we'll be doing this on our Ubuntu 1 system. But let's drop back to the slides first.